I'm joined now by Senator Angus King, independent from Maine, who caucuses with the Democrats. Thanks for joining me on a very busy night.
Sure, Ari. Glad to help.
Is there an argument the president can make tonight that would make you support funding the wall through Congress?
Unless he has some extraordinary data that nobody's seen yet, I don't see how. And there's a real big question contained within your question is, what is the wall? One of the problems that we have here is that there's been no plan submitted that I know of for what we're talking about, where, how much it would cost, what would it do, what parts of the border it would cover. That's one of the real issues here is he keeps talking about something called the wall, but we don't really know what he wants. A typical construction project by the federal government, you've got to submit plans and say, this is what we're going to do, this is how big it will be, this is what it'll cost. We have none of that. So
what does it tell you, Senator? I mean, you make such a clear point. I think people can understand. What does it tell you that the president wants a certain amount of money to say he's won on this, but according to you, does not have any record of putting forward even where the money would go?
That's right. And what it says is, I think he's trying to make good on a campaign promise, one that he made hundreds of times. But of course, also hundreds of times he said Mexico was going to pay for it. That part of the campaign promise seems to have gone away. But the other piece is that it's a crisis. And I would refer you to a report by the Department of Homeland Security in the Trump administration, September of 2017, about a year ago, about an assessment of the situation on the southwest border. All the numbers are down. Interdictions, arrests, recidivism, everything is way down from where it was at a peak in 2007. It's a problem, but to call it a crisis and then to go from that to a national emergency, right, I think is a real stretch, and it's frankly an attempt to end run our constitutional process, in my view.
And Senator, we've been speaking to people all across the spectrum on this. Take a listen to a Republican congressman who was defending Trump and saying they've got to have some money in the wall to support reopening the government, who I just interviewed on a previous show.
Sure.
National security is a huge priority. We have more deaths than crime created because of a poor southern border than problems coming out of the Middle East right now. So I think we all need to acknowledge that this is a huge problem and we want to fix the problem.
What do you say to that argument, which I guess is a two-part? One, a view of the risk of crime from the southern border, and two, an assumption that beginning constructing the border wall is the best way to prevent it?
Well, I think, again, your question contains the answer. The first thing to say is, Ari, nobody here is for open borders. I'm really tired of hearing people say, you're either for the wall or you're for open borders. That's nonsense. All of us on both sides of the aisle have voted repeatedly for significant investments in border security. The question is, what's the best expenditure of that money in terms of bang for the buck, return on investment? Is it $20 million a mile for a wall, or are there places where fencing would be more appropriate, or drones, or other sensor technologies? What would be the best use if to deal with the problem rather than this sort of one-size-fits-all? And again, it goes back to what I said before. We don't even know exactly what they're talking about. There's already wall there. I've seen it. There's some places where it makes sense. There are other places where it makes no sense. And yet, we don't know. The president's basically asking for a blank check. Let me build a wall. I'll put it where I want. It'll look like what I want. You have nothing to say about it. That's not the way the system works.
Would you say, from Donald Trump's business experience, that giving him a blank check is a good idea?
I don't think it's a good idea to give a blank check to anybody in this kind of situation.
Fair enough.
If this were a military construction project, they've got to go through engineering. They've got to come to the Congress, to the authorizing committee,
right,
to the appropriations committee. That's what the law requires.
Yeah.
That's what the Constitution says.
Well, Senator, I know it's a busy night, and we'll all be watching to see what the president says in detail. I really appreciate you making time for the beat tonight, Senator King.
Absolutely. Thanks, Ari.
Thank you, sir.